Okay, guys, the list of incredible guests never stops. This is the home for incredible guests. Today I have famed British actor and anti-woke activist Laurence Fox. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very good. How are you doing, Gad?
I'm doing great. I think we connected maybe about 3 months ago when the whole incident happened with you. I think it was on BBC. For the folks who don't know about that story, tell us that episode.
Yeah, I was touring. I was preparing to release an album that I wrote, and I was doing a gig in Manchester, and they said to me, "Do you want to go on Question Time?" which is a BBC TV show, and I'm like, "Yeah, sure." It didn't even cross my mind. I quite enjoyed the show. I'd watched it and shouted at the TV when I was watching it. When people had given answers that I didn't enjoy, and they often ask a sort of an artist or an actor or someone to be on there. So I turned up and.
But you had no idea what the topic was going to be about, what you're going to be.
I had a feeling that they might ask me about Prince Harry and Meghan because it was so much in the news, and actors and carbon footprints and all of this sort of stuff. So I had a feeling, but no one gave me a heads up. And then one of the audience members said that Meghan Markle was the reason why she was hounded. She said she was hounded out of the UK as a result of racism. I then said, no, it wasn't racism. And then the world descended on my head. And it came as quite a shock.
So by you simply questioning the narrative that she might have left Britain for reasons other than the genocidal racism that is hurled at her, you were branded what? An untouchable, a Nazi, a white supremacist, correct?
Well, it was all right at the beginning. I went to bed that night thinking, oh, I think that's all right. I agree with what I said.
Oh, rookie mistake.
Yeah. And then I woke up in the morning and my phone exploded. Mostly positively, actually, from friends and family and people saying, "Oh, thank God, someone had to say that." It's lots of people were thinking it, and then I kind of thought, "Oh, good, that's nice, that's positive." And then the attack began, which I quite enjoyed at the beginning because I thought I'm not saying anything really highly controversial. Except that I did say to the woman back who started it, the Rachel Boyle woman, who I'm told was a plant by the BBC to put in there and just to wind me up because they followed my social media and they knew what my views were on various things. That I had said to her, no, to accuse me of being a white privileged male is actually ostensibly racist, isn't it? So so that didn't go down very well. And then the cancellation campaign began, where people took a comment I made about a Sikh soldier in 1917, and then it all began this sort of very peculiar traumatic experience actually of being piled on, which I haven't had before. And then I started to go, oh dear, what have I done? I've poked the wrong hornet's nest. But then I went back and I watched what I'd said, and I went, no, I totally agree with what I said. So it's been a funny few months because my life was being really peaceful. I just finished filming a great job, and then suddenly it's like.
So having experienced this, does it embolden you to say, I'm now going to speak even more my mind because I can't let these cretins do this to me or to someone else who may not be as famous as me or have as big a platform as me? Or are you now more tepid? You know what? I better not poke the wrong bear. I've learned my lesson, oh masters.
I'm not. I've learned the one thing I have learned in life is that it's not good to submit to a bully. If you submit to a bully, they bully you more. Is my experience of life. Having been on both the receiving end of bullying and been bullying in my school times, as you go through the thing. So you don't give in. I don't believe you give in. But at the same time, I think what it's made me feel is I have to learn, which you can only do through conversation, right? I have to learn how to express myself in a way which is possibly less exasperated. Because I was so exasperated with what I thought was so directly provocative. And I, maybe banging my head on the table was possibly a bit much. So my motivation is to absolutely continue speaking, but it's to learn how to speak articulately, to listen better. So it's actually motivated me in a way. But, and it's made me realize how important the conversation is, because I didn't realize how bad the conversation had become, to the point where it's not even a conversation anymore. It's just insults.
I admire your desire to try to sort of modulate your delivery in an attempt to reach more people. But here's my regrettable prediction, Laurence. Whatever you do, it's not going to stop the monsters from coming at you, right? So, for example, when you're in ISIS and you have other very committed Muslims, if they're not as committed as you, then they are worthy of killing, right? This is what I call the orgiastic self-cannibalism. So in other words, there is no amount of modulation of your delivery and your language that's going to stop people from doing what they ultimately wish to do, which is do not speak something that is contrary to what I tell you to say. Boy, got it? So I'm not sure that, while I admire your desire to say, hey, let me look back and let me introspect and let me think about what I might have said wrong, I don't think that's a noble reflex, but it's one that's not going to protect you from the mob.
It's not so much for my sake that I want. It's not so much for their sake or to protect me. It's because when I listen to the intelligent people, yourself included, people like Victor Davis Hanson, people who really understand what they're saying, I admire the way that they can make the same point that I want to make in a more articulate way.
Wonderful.
It's not because I'm frightened of the mob and I think that I'm going to reason the mob down. The mob doesn't have any sense. The mob is imposing upon you their will, and if you do not subscribe to their will, they will destroy you. I'm fully aware of that. So I'm not. It's for my own benefit to increase the capacity of my own brain, because I'm not formally educated in that way. I've only educated myself much later in life.
What a humble way to. It's wonderful, great stuff. Let me share with you a story that just happened to me today. I don't know if you suffer from insomnia. I'm so excited by life that I almost feel like sleeping is a waste of time. And so I woke up at 5 a.m, couldn't sleep, so many exciting things to do. So I get on, maybe wrongly, on social media at 5 a.m, having had only about 4.5 hours of sleep. And then let me give you the background to the story. So there's a woman about a month or a month and a half ago, I can't remember exactly when. She is a doctoral student, ostensibly in neuroscience. So you'd think she's committed to science, she's committed to reason, to thinking, to evidence-based thinking. And she's a Black woman whose whole identity is wrapped in her blackness, black and so on, black, right? So I was interacting with someone, I don't remember the exact details, on a thread. She comes in, I've never met this woman, never interacted with her. She comes in and says, I'm paraphrasing, but the specific words are exactly what she said. Your opinion doesn't matter. You shut your mouth, sort of, you old white male. Right? Now, she perfectly picked on the wrong guy, because as I explain in my forthcoming book, I say, channel your inner honey badger. A honey badger is a profoundly ferocious animal. It can stand to 6 lions, and the lions go, holy moly, this guy's too much, right? And it is 1/10 their size. So when you poke me, I am the nicest, most mellow, sweetest, most jocular guy you could find. Maybe it's part of my honor culture of the Middle East. Maybe it's the unique combination of my genes. Once you attack me, there is no end to how far I will go to redress that situation. So I start going after her, but endlessly. So one of the tools I use, other than logic, science, and reason, is, regrettably, you don't have that trump card, but I do. I am a war refugee from Lebanon who's Jewish. I win victimology poker. I'm the king of the oppression Olympics. Therefore, I turn those cards against her, and I start using the language of the woke police. Why are you marginalizing a brown man of color, a war refugee? Now she's unable. Why do you hate Jews so much? I feel unsafe. I need protection. She panics so much because now I've turned The only calculus that she knows against her, she shuts her account down. She shuts it. She's out.
Right.
A month and a half later, when she now feels emboldened because, riots, she comes back after me and starts spreading nonsense about me. Dr. Gatsad bullies students online. So then I say, so let me get this straight. You come after me. You call me an old guy. So you attack me for my age, for my supposed skin color, although I'm from the Middle East, and for, being male. So you're bigoted. When I defend myself, you're the victim. So now what happens? Everybody gets so incensed by her. They go after her. What does she do? Closes her account again. So imagine what a cretinous individual this person is, right? That she remembers for a month and a half later to come back after me. She doesn't tag me and starts contacting my university and so on. But guess what? I win because I don't let anybody damage my reputation. So stand your ground and we shall win this battle.
Thank you. I think that's true. I don't have an option. I have a lot of people going after me and saying, how could they're tagging in the companies I work for, saying, how can you hire this white supremacist and all of this stuff? And I think it's really sad, but I often think that humor is a good way of dealing with this shit, right? And so it is quite fun to play the game back, to use the language back. Otherwise, you're essentially going into a boxing ring with one hand tied behind your back. Because I was raised in a family where we were raised in a Christian family. So not everyone would say I'm a Christian, but we were raised with the belief that each person is unique and is, and each individual is equal to each other. So these are the rules that I operate by when I challenge people with my views and their views. I accept that their views we can challenge each other. But these guys that come after you and this woman who's come after you, they don't play by those rules. So you have to, they're tying one hand behind your back because you're expecting, not you, but I am naively, not anymore, but naively expected them to use the values of respect, reason, logic, love, understanding. There's none of it. But it's a hopeless world in that way, and it's very sad. You only have to read some of the things that people say to me, and I'm just like, please just engage with what I'm saying, not just like it's just one long bleep reel.
So give me a sense of, so in the totality of the public that has interacted with you, I would still suspect that 95 to 99% were probably in favor of what you did. Would that be correct?
In the first week after it happened, I had people stopping me every 10 feet walking down the street to shake my hand.
More than when you were an actor.
Much more than when I was an actor, which doesn't say much about my acting skill. And people would stop me, and then there's this very busy road in Haymarket in London. And this guy got out of a car. And he went, thank you. And people I know that people think a lot of the same things that I think because I hear them say it. It's not like I'm sitting around a dinner table with my friends and I'm the only one saying, is this all getting a bit out of hand? Lots of people agree. But also the problem with this sort of, in my view, the problem with this sort of gently small c conservative liberal view is that people don't feel that they need to expunge that view a lot. Whereas, these very hypocritical beliefs that people hold and the what's it called, the projection that this extreme leftism does is social media is the perfect place for it. But in real life, I have a stack of letters and a stack of things and a stack of great memories and great friends that I've made actually through just saying what I felt was not my truth or anything like that, just my observation based on the evidence that I'd witnessed.
Amazing.
Especially over Meghan Markle. It was like, this is the evidence. She had a beautiful wedding. The British public were extremely behind her. And my view was that it wasn't racism that forced her out. It was my view, especially being a sort of minor celebrity compared to her, that, actors like attention. And, if you join the royal family and you're not the center of attention, maybe it had a little bit to do with that. All things are multifaceted, right? there's not one reason, and it victimizes. The thing I don't like about it is to call, once you start playing them their language, it's a game of who's the biggest victim, and how is that empowering to anybody?
It's incredible. What about within your industry? So I suspect, your agent called you and said, "What the hell are you doing, moron? Can you shut your big mouth, you idiot?" Okay, so I understand that he or she is looking at your career trajectory and is trying to be pragmatic. But within the circle of people that do they come up to you and say, "Hey, don't tell anybody I'm with you," or are they aghast by your Nazi supremacy?
My favorite message I got was from my old agent, who the message reinforced why it's probably good that he's not my current agent. The message read something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, "Don't you understand? You work in the most liberal profession on earth. You'll never work again." And I just thought, there's an oxymoron in your sentence that you've just missed here. And no, my agent, actually, I am full of respect for my agent. She's well established, and she's let me get on with it. She obviously advises about trying to keep these things quiet, which was actually why I felt 3 months ago I was very emotional. It was really, I hadn't been used to that sort of trauma before.
Yeah.
It's quite traumatic to think, oh my God, my livelihood's gone, my children, what am I going to do? No, she was really good. But yeah, no, in my industry is a monoculture. I mean, there's some really good things. The job I just worked on, the Netflix job I worked on, wasn't very monoculture, but it was done by a very interesting and amazing guy. But a lot of films I turn on, a lot of TV shows I turn on, I'm just like,
Well, I think that maybe the only industry that might be even more liberal than you guys, or at least certainly more responsible for the idea pathogens that we have, is my industry, because you are the downstream effect of what we promulgate at patient zero, right? So it takes intellectuals to come up with the real bullshit stuff, which then parasitizes the minds of everybody, including every moronic actor, not you included, of course, right? So, but that's really what happens, right? So let me just give you a very good example of this. Professor Dr. Ashton Kutcher, or whatever his name is. Of course, I'm being sarcastic and calling him with it, right? So, Professor Kutcher today gets on, does a clip. Did you watch it at all?
I didn't today. I had to turn it off because I've been in trouble for saying that every human life is sacred. So I've been...
That's disgusting, boy. How could you say something like that? That's disgusting.
Very, very upset with me about that.
You should apologize. You should kneel, by the way. I don't know if you've seen the kneeling rituals now that are spreading. Have you seen that at all?
I've seen the kneeling, and I felt that I'm not prepared to kneel in front of anybody, because I don't feel the power balance is right in that situation. Call me old-fashioned, but I'm up for a hug or shaking hands.
Yeah, well, not with COVID anymore, because you can't shake hands. By the way, with COVID, you can't go to your grandmother's funeral because science, but you can meet with 10,000 of your close friends for noble looting. You see how COVID doesn't infect the noble looters, but it infects you if you go to your grandmother's funeral. So it's a very strange behavior that this virus has. I just thought I would share that with you.
It's an amazingly powerful virus. What's so interesting about it is Douglas Murray said something so wonderful about the fact that what was true yesterday is now completely untrue today.
Exactly.
So we have been locked down in the UK for months, and then the protests took place yesterday, and thousands of people are on the streets, and there was a huge investigation into the Prime Minister's chief advisor as to whether he went in his car to a car park somewhere. And he was a huge press conference. It went on for hours. And then you see 20,000 people and you go, does the virus discern between these two particular problems? No, it doesn't. And therefore you have to go, is this a good faith argument? And my grandmother called me Mr. Logic when I was little. And I think I've probably got a bit of some sort of, Asperger's-y type need for reality and truth or whatever it is. And I find the whole thing, the hypocrisy is such a complex thing to get your head around, especially as I was always taught to look in. I was raised to look in to yourself. Don't look at other people and see what's wrong with them. Look into yourself and see what's wrong with yourself. So therefore, the hypocrisy of other people transferring their own, whatever it is, it's so negative. And also now that the words are stopping, the wars are going to start, and it's awful.
Yeah.
I'm stood by watching it, and I'm going, oh, this is horrible.
So returning to Professor Dr. Kutcher, yeah. So he put out a short clip where he is explaining to us that those who say that all lives matter, why it is important that they be castigated, and then he almost starts crying because black, he's so into the black cause. But then he says something else that is equally creepy. He then says, I was reading a story to my children, and my son looks at me and says, well, why don't you start with me, Daddy? Why do you always start with the daughter? To which he then says, oh no, son, in our household, girls come first. They should always come first. And then he goes on to the whole, the future is female kind of thing. So now imagine this gentleman who's entrusted with raising healthy individuals, both male and female individuals, my daughter and my son. And he is telling his son that because of past grievances, justifiable grievances against a group called women, I'm going to squash your identity. I'm going to clobber you because regrettably you have testicles. So in this household, understand that the girl always comes first. So of course I went after him. But I mean, think about how broken this person's moral compass is. Number one, because he lectures to us that to say that all lives are sacred is grotesque, and then he almost starts crying, but then you wonder if the crying is because of his acting or if it's truly felt. And then he tells us that he genuinely favors the daughter more than the son because sexism. Any thoughts on this?
Well, no, I mean, how can you impose an ideology on a family? The whole point of a family is that, again, I would take it back to the fact that we're all unique individuals. My youngest son was very into classical music when he was really little for some reason. And he would listen to Verdi, and he would go, he'd love it at night, make him calm. And he said, I believe in reincarnation. And I said, okay, but that means you could be a reincarnation of Verdi, for example. So, maybe you're just a unique individual. So I raise my children to say that they are totally unique and that we share huge amounts in the brotherhood of man with other people. I don't think that the family is a place to politicize and to bring ideologies in, other than love. The ideologies that have lasted.
It's incredible. I mean.
It's sad, and with the gender politics as well, it's very sad in that way. I find it all sad.
And to use children. So there was another set of tweets that I posted yesterday from a woman who had posted a sign of her child. The child must have been 3. You saw that one?
Yeah, I saw that one.
And it points to her, this is what white privilege is. I am sorry. And you could tell that the child is confused because she doesn't know what is it that she must do to get the ego strokes from the mother. So you are using a 3-year-old child to convince her, to communicate that she is born of original white guilt, right? Original sin, but original white guilt. She is the wrong skin color. Therefore, she holds a sign that says, I am disgusting. I am privileged. And she doesn't see anything wrong with that. It's insane.
Well, what about putting her in a MAGA hat? It's like, it's all of it is posturing. I don't think children need it, but every child I've met, all of the education that my children are around, all of it. As I've said before, my son has said to me on an occasion, I'm sorry if this is racist, Dad, but Mum is a better cook than you, and things like that. So, our children are being raised. I'm fearful for the next 25, 30 years because this is entrenched.
Yeah.
I have friends that have been at Oxford and Cambridge, which used to be the bastions of great in universities in the UK who I just laugh at some of the things that they say to me.
Well, this is, by the way, why
Can I smoke on this, by the way?
Go ahead. Go for it. Thank you for asking. No problem.
I don't want you to get passive virtual smoking. You see.
You know that I have never taken a single puff of anything in my entire life.
You're a smart man.
Oh, well, thank you.
Very addictive substance.
I do have one vice, and that is that I wish I were as thin as you are. So you see, it all balances out. You smoke, I
I've
don't.
seen your carbs thing. I've seen you getting busted by your wife on the internet when she got a photo of you eating a pretzel or something.
But I'm convinced, by the way, I'm speaking now as an evolutionary psychologist, that this is her strategy of mate guarding. As soon as I become a bit more slim, and I mean, look at this face. I mean, this is a biblical face. So the only thing that protects her from other women is to keep me pleasantly plump, because once I become thin like the gorgeous Laurence Fox, then I cause marital strife everywhere I go, you see?
She's doing you a favor.
She's doing herself a favor, because she's
doing
keeping
herself a favor. She needs to speak to Ashton Kutcher, Professor Kutcher.
Professor Kutcher, exactly. So
Make her son's fat.
Yeah. So I want to also talk about, acting and anything else that you'd like to discuss. Of course, we could go back to the woke stuff if you'd like. I wanted to tell you a very quick, incredible story that comes from your industry that speaks to the beauty of social media. I mean, because social media is a terrible cesspool of ugliness, but it's also a wonderful place where people can connect that otherwise would have never had an intersection of their lives. You and I.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So to me, that is so exciting. I'm going to tell you an incredible story that comes from the film industry. So about maybe 4 years ago, somewhere around there, I was sitting at home. My wife had fallen asleep. The kids are asleep. And I'm sitting there too tired to work. So I start turning the station and I hit a movie. And as you know, sometimes you come at the start of a movie, a scene captures you, and now you're off. You've been caught, right? So it was a movie called Cut Close, I think. Does that ring a bell? Or Cut Snake. It's an Australian movie. I think the term refers to sort of unbridled rage. It's an Australian term. I think it's Cut Snake. We could look it up later. Now the movie struck me as amazing. It was in an era of the 1970s. This guy who just came out of prison, who's very dangerous. Look, anyways, it's a very cool movie. I thought it was so brilliant that I said, you know what, I'm going to look up the director to see who directed this movie. I look him up. I do a quick search on him to see that, he can speak. He's an intelligent guy. He could be interesting. I reach out to him. I invite him on the show. And within a week of my having sat and watched this somewhat obscure Australian movie, I was sitting and having a chat with the director of that movie. I mean, isn't that a brilliant thing?
It's the best part of social media, isn't it? And it's the best part of the internet that I've connected with the most wonderful people, because you feel it's often, if you don't subscribe to the monoculture, you feel quite alone, because a lot of people are quite scared to challenge that culture, mainly through fear of losing their livelihood. And so I've met some amazing people, and I've had some support from those amazing people, and I've got to meet a couple of my heroes. I've had lunch with them.
Tell me some of them. Who are they?
I had lunch with Douglas Murray.
Okay.
To lunch.
He's been on my show, by the way. You should listen to him.
There is a man that knows how to express himself.
Oh, yes. He's wonderful.
And I read his book, and then I got into trouble on Question Time, and he was like, let me take you to lunch. Let's talk about this. And, he basically schooled me through the process of what was going to happen next. And he said, this is what's going to happen next. This is what they're going to go for. This is my experiences. And, I've met so many lovely people through this. So there is a very positive thing. And it is great. I've had similar experiences in my life with seeing something and reaching out to people. But social media is now great. We met in this way.
It's unbelievable. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I'm pointing in the right direction. Do you see a poster behind me there? Am I pointing the right place? Do you see it?
Yeah.
That came to me from a fan. I mean, imagine a fan who does this incredible artwork, gets it all done, sends, and I get tons of this stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable the kind of wonderful people. If you open yourself up, right? If you don't live in an echo chamber, this is why, for example, my show is not about only interviewing, fellow scientists and so on, because The world is filled with all sorts of interesting people, the educated, the uneducated, the chefs, the actors, anyone who is interesting. I'd love to sit down and talk to them. And I think that takes an openness of mind and of spirit to be able to open yourself up in that way, right?
I couldn't agree more. And that is going to be the only defense we have left.
Exactly right.
I think that's the only, my father says it to me all the time. He says patience, love, and reason. They're the only weapons we have.
So true. So how did you How did you decide to become an actor? And I know you're also a musician. Maybe you want to tell us a bit about that. Is this something that you accidentally fell into? Is this something that you dreamt of when you were 5 years old? How did you end up in this trajectory?
I'm stubborn as hell. So I was working as a labourer for a couple of years, and I earned £30 a day. And then I got bored of it. I hated it.
How old were you?
I was so from when I left school. I left school with good grades, but I was also quite not controversial, but I was not a great school kid because it was a very traditional English boarding school, and we were raised to speak our mind, and those two things didn't combine well. And so I became a gardener for 2 years, labourer, digger, just humping stuff around, and then. My dad said to me over breakfast one day, he was like, why don't you you ever thought about acting? And I was like, yeah, all right, fine, whatever. And I went to audition for the acting schools in the UK, and I got right down to the final audition of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, which is like the big one in the UK. And I didn't get in. And I was so angry about not getting in that I thought, I now have to succeed at this. And that was it. So then I went to do that, and then I played music as well in the side. But speaking of people that you meet who are amazing on the internet, I was reached out to by this girl called Juliet Fogria from New York, who's also an immigrant from communist Eastern Europe, though in her case. And she designed all my album artwork, everything. She did it all.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what do I owe you? And she said, nothing. I reached out to you.
Oh, unbelievable.
And she flew from New York. She's not got a lot of means. And I was touring, and she sent me a message because she'd done all the posters. She said, I hope it went well. And I said, it is. I said, come. And she went, I can't afford it. And she went, I went, come. And she went, okay, I'm coming. So she flies over from New York. I meet her and her husband at the show. And we then go and spend all night talking and drinking vodka and having an amazing time. And now we're mates. Like when I go to New York, she will be the person I call.
Wow. But by the way, I don't know what your level of religiosity is. I'm not a religious person. I'm an atheist, although I'm very Jewish in my identity, but I'm a very committed non-believer. And yet I always explain to people that the idea that you could only have moments of spirituality if you believe in I think Christopher Hitchens called him a celestial dictator, to use his term, right? Is really an affront to the magisterial nature of life. When you just described now that you've become mates, you went out and you drank vodka and you've bonded, that's magic. That's spiritual. That's what makes it. If I have a great time with Laurence today, having this chat, then I walk away, I'm buzzing for the next 3 hours. I'm excited that I'm going to post this up. That's magic. I don't need to. Now, if you believe in the religious stuff, as long as you don't impose it on anybody else, go for it. So I'm not anti-religion, but the idea that we could only have purpose and meaning through this code that was written by some religion is an affront to the beauty of life, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said about not imposing it upon people is the most important thing. I don't know where I sit with all of that. What I do sit with comfortably is the fact that there is something outside of me which is more central to life than I am. So I feel responsible to something more wonderful, to be that the wonder of nature, or be that whatever. Be that to the, in seeing God, if that's the word, in other people. Man is made in the image of God. The concept of love, all of these things. I seem to, yeah, I'm not a sort of die-hard religious person, but I was raised in a religious family, and I think the whole idea of this, the uniqueness of each human being, and the brotherhood of man, and the fact that that's what brings us together, I think I find comfort in that, and I enjoy that.
Well, I think, look, the fact that you sacrifice the immediate expedient career considerations, which you know by speaking out on social media, you're going to get blowback. In a sense, that is an act of love. I don't need to put it, I mean, right? Because what you're basically saying is, I'm going to put the defense of truth, as I best understand it, ahead of my selfish careerist pursuits. What could be more awe-inspiring than that, right? This demonstrates that there is something greater than you. You are stepping outside your selfish interests of your career, your next Netflix deal, and saying, well, no, I can't keep quiet. Because people often ask me, well, how do you survive in academia? How do you do it? How can you not be canceled? Why are you constantly in fight mode? And I tell them, so this is my answer to what you and I go through. I say, look, I have this punishing and exacting code of personal conduct, so that at the end of the day, when I put my head down on my pillow, I need to feel that I did whatever I could to defend truth in whichever small or big way that I can. If I've done my part, then I'm not a fraud. If I walked away from the opportunity to do what I could have done, then I'm a fraud. It's as if I hear a woman being accosted or mugged or raped in an alley, and I pretend that I don't hear her cries because I don't want to get hurt. Well, that's called cowardice. That's the opposite of courage. So I think there is an endless number of ways by which we can be honorable, virtuous, and that is awe-inspiring. And I don't need God to have that exacting personal code of conduct.
Exactly, and that's it's totally fine. But what you're describing, truth, the idea of truth, truth is a universal thing, not a subjective thing, isn't it? So the idea of God is that there is a universal truth and a universal love and a universal. That's how I see it. Right. So I don't think we're disagreeing on that. I mean, I find certain parts of the Bible inspiring. I really like, there's a psalm that I really like, but then I've just found out that that's been co-opted by the pro-choice movement in America. And I was like, I have it tattooed on my arm. And then I'm like, oh no, it's been co-opted by the pro-choice, the pro-life movement have taken it. So, look, I'm not, this is what I'm saying to you. I'm not an educated man. So I do believe in truth.
Listen, you make a lot more sense than a lot of people who are way more educated than you. So I wouldn't put so much stock in education. Education could be good, or it can parasitize your mind into mush. So it doesn't matter.
I like your stuff on that. I was enjoying your trigonometry with Constantine and Francis as well about the parasites of the mind.
Oh, right. Oh, great. I'm glad you watched it. Thank you. Let's get back to your craft. Okay, I'm going to hit you with one because I'm thinking as an evolutionary psychologist, I'm thinking about romantic jealousy. Would there be a situation where you are playing in a role with a stupendously beautiful woman, and yes, you're acting obviously, but she is a stupendous woman, and then you return home and the wife says, maybe there was too much kissing in that acting? Or do you ever get into these types of, I mean, I could have easily asked the same question if I were sitting with a female actress here, so I hope I'm not going to get stupid, idiotic, imbecilic comments in the comment section. Does the intimacy that comes with playing certain roles then threaten your personal life?
I think it doesn't threaten your personal life. I mean, I'm lucky. Not lucky. I'm not married anymore, so it doesn't it doesn't get in the way for me. But I think it's important within acting that what's interesting to watch when you're watching movies and everything is truth. Again, we're talking about something that's authentic, and the whole thing is ruined. Any form of intimate scenes are ruined by how cold and horrible the whole situation is. So you don't ever really, really get into it. No, it actually probably requires more acting than a normal scene, because you've got some guy coming in halfway through and moving your little willy pouch, who's and going.
You mean your big willy pouch?
Yeah, exactly. My enormous willy pouch that I've had to have tailor made. Took several camel skins to make.
Right. So but in the past, when you were married, did these kinds of, I mean, was she also an actress or was she out of the industry?
She was an actress. I'm not a jealous person, so I'd be like, do what you do. But there was one instance when the girl I was with had been doing a sex scene with a lot of cake involved, and she came home with a lot of cake in her hair, and I was a bit like, oh, this seemed to have gone well. But no, I'm not sure. I think everyone's different, though. Show business is it takes interesting characters to get into showing off for a living, doesn't it?
Right.
So there's high levels of narcissism and self-worship going on, and there's a lot of people break up in show business because they have affairs with other members of the cast. I've seen it many a time.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny that you use the word narcissism because I think it was about a decade ago I'd written an article on my Psychology Today column titled "The Narcissism and Grandiosity of Celebrities," and in the article I was speaking about the endless desire of celebrities to weigh in on topics that they know very little about. Now, remember, as I said earlier to you, I'm not suggesting that there's an elitism where only the educated should speak. Not at all. But if you're going to weigh in on physics or epidemiology or neuroscience or psychology, then I do expect you to know what you're talking about. I don't expect that just because you play a superhero, that entitles you to save the world with your bullshit, right? And so one of the... so... So I'll let you compose yourself. Okay. So then the point is, and I was saying, well, why? So what are the reasons why they feel so emboldened? And I offered several reasons. One of which I want to pitch to you and get your opinion on it. So I compared it to something akin to survival guilt. So when you have a plane crash, and the person next to you dies, and through the vagaries of life you don't. Well, oftentimes there's a massive psychological trauma because, I don't really feel, why did I survive and this lovely fellow next to me died? Like, I mean, what's so special about me? And people go through this really deep psychological angst about, well, hence survival guilt. And so I argued that actors suffer from a form of existential guilt, which is, I know that I'm not worthy of making $20 million a movie. I know I'm an asshole, and I know that 3 weeks ago I was serving coffee at Starbucks, and through the vagaries of life I got the role in the Avengers, or whatever the movies, whatever, the Transformers, and now I've become a huge star where people are dying to meet me because they truly believe in their brain that I saved the universe, right? And so I know that really deep down I'm a fraud and I'm not worthy of all this adulation. But if I could now come in and explain to the world how you can cure this or do that, then maybe, at least in my own mind, I can justify my word. That's why Ashton Kutcher can become Professor Dr. Kutcher, because he is a naturally lobotomized moron who lives in Malibu. But if he can explain to the rest of us how to act, how to not be racist, then he truly is worthy of all the adulation. What do you think of my theory?
Couldn't agree with you more. Well, I mean, look, not all actors, by the way, because there's other elements to it, to the pathology. So as an actor, the first thing that happens to you is you have all of your own agency taken away. So someone picks you up in a Mercedes in the morning. They don't pick you up in a Mercedes in the morning because they think that you're so wonderful. They think you're so stupid you couldn't get your own way to work. That's why they pick you up in a Mercedes. You get to work, they drive you up to a little cabin that they give you on set. You get out and someone says, that's your cabin. And you go, yeah, I can work that out. It had my name on the door. And they go, can I get you some food? And you're like, I can get my own food. And then they go, on the radio, they go, Laurence is getting his own food. Laurence is getting his own food. So you're treated like a giant spoiled baby anyway. You're encouraged slightly to behave like a giant spoiled baby because that's when the acting is good, when people are most playful. But yeah, you after a while, I think you do get a sense of there's a sense of entitlement. It's also, there's a cognitive dissonance going on between the fact that you have to believe you're a superhero for a period of time if you're playing a superhero. I played a policeman for 10 years, and interestingly, I became quite good at noticing stuff about people's houses. Like I would walk in, I'd go, oh, he's diabetic, and I would know just from looking around. So the parts do slightly affect you, but yeah, I think it's the problem with show business in that way is because we are so pampered that we want to give something back, and that is the greatness of our own wisdom. I think it's actually more that we've been elevated up, or I mean, not me so much, but some of those that have been elevated up, that you start to believe what you're told.
Exactly.
Which is, and that's, you know, and that's not good for you. But I'm lucky because I come from a family of actors. So when I was first on screen, my dad took the wages from me and he said, "You're welcome. That was for your drama school." And then, you know, and when we sit around as a family and watch each other acting, we just take the piss out of each other. Like,
so when you say everybody in the family is not, meaning what? Your mom, your dad, how
well,
many?
My mum was a nurse, but a lot of people in my family act. My little brother acts. So when we see each other on the screen, if it's on in the background, if someone comes on, it's just free reign to rip into that person and say how terrible. To the point where I was burgled recently. I have CCTV in my house. I was burgled. The guys are going in and out the house with the stuff. I wake up, I come out, and I look out the door like this, and I'm showing my dad the footage of me being burgled. And he went, "That's the shittest piece of looking out of door scared acting I've ever seen." I'm being burgled at this point. You know,
I think I'm going to like your dad if I ever meet him. He seems like a cool cat.
Awesome.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that, you know, in my field, in evolutionary psychology, we often hear, it's a false dichotomy, but nature versus nurture. And the reason why I call it a false dichotomy is because for most phenomena, we really are an inextricable mix of both, right? I mean, our environments affect us, and also we're born with our unique combination of genes. That notwithstanding, we often hear, you know, our leaders born or made, our entrepreneurs born or made. So then let me turn the question to your industry. Could I, because of whatever unique traits constitute SAAD, suddenly be cast into a role and you'd say, "God damn, that was great acting"? Or no, for most people, it doesn't come naturally. It is something like, you know, you went through training, you went to school. So how much of it is due to you're just naturally born good actor versus you're trained to be an actor?
I'd say it's probably, acting is probably 90% natural ability.
That's what I would have thought.
10% training. It's very odd to have to get out of your Mercedes once they've got you your breakfast, and then you walk past 150 people who are either like you or don't like you, depending on how nice you are to them, with people hanging lights and doing all this, and then you end up and it's just you and a camera right there, and you've got to pretend that some lines you learnt, in my case in the car on the way in, but in other people's cases, you know, poring over them over many years, to deliver them like they just popped into your head. You know, and that's either you can either do that or you can't. But you can get better at doing it.
So okay, so that explains instinctively. I get how that would be the natural 90%. Give me examples of the elements that could be taught. What are the mechanics? What are the tricks? So if you're a soccer player, I could tell you, well, you know, you're kicking the ball incorrectly at the wrong place of the ball for it to be able to bend. This is how you have to do it to bend it like Beckham. So give me those 10% skills that you learn.
So the example, I was taught by a very famous voice coach at acting school called Robert Palmer, and he taught Margaret Thatcher a special breathing technique called pharyngeal resonance, which is so that she didn't have to breathe in at the end of a sentence, because in those days, I don't know what it's like nowadays, but in those days, women were interrupted more, apparently. So he taught her this very special trick of how to speak and breathe very quickly in the middle of a sentence and do those things. So I learned, for example, if I have to do a very long speech in a play, I learned at drama school about how to hold your diaphragm, how to use your voice properly, how to project your voice, how to not strain your voice. I mean, I strain my voice all the time because I smoke and I live a wild and crazy life. But it's the technical aspects of movement is quite important. You know, the way you hold your body and how those sorts of things.
What about the stuff that I hear? And forgive me, I'm pretty ignorant about all this stuff. So, you know, you hear Robert De Niro is the epitome of the method actor, right? The guy who then never breaks out of his character, as even when he's offset and so on. Is this something that typically most actors subscribe to, or not, or what? How does that fit into the story?
Well, each to their own, but I can tell you how hard it is to spend time on set with someone who's doing method acting. It's really, really hard.
Because they don't turn off.
Well, it's also very serious, and I don't think it's very serious. I think it's like the most important thing is that you're playing and you're truthful and it's real in the moment. And therefore, I don't like being very prepared particularly, because I like to know what the story is and I like to know roughly where I am in the story, and then I like to see what happens when I go. When they say action, I concentrate really hard for that period of time, and then when they say cut, I go back to taking the piss out of whoever it was that I was taking the piss out of before. But
usually it'd be your dad taking the piss out of you.
Yeah, well, that's how I was raised, But I work with an actor. Sometimes when you're on set, you have to do this thing called a wild track. So you do the scene, but for some reason they can't get the microphone in to record the sound properly. So what they do is you do the scene and then they turn the camera off and you do a wild track of the dialogue so that they can just put it on afterwards. And I've worked with an actor who they said, can we just do a wild track of a scene we did yesterday? And he said, yeah, but I'm going to need the costume that I was in yesterday. And they're like, yeah, but it's just, we're only hearing your voice. And he's like, no, I need the costume.
I need the whole thing to be immersed in the role.
And that's when I bang my head on the table and I go, I mean, look, whatever works. I don't criticize people. If they want to be method, it just makes the day longer and there's less laughter.
So I'm going to tell you a story and you're going to tell me if you felt the same thing or what I felt. Well, I guess he won the Oscar, so maybe it wasn't so strange what I felt. So I watched. Actually, it was my wife and I. My wife and I were celebrating our 20th anniversary in December, and so we decided, to do many things that day. The kids were at school, and so we went to catch the matinee of The Joker. Right? Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, some of those scenes that he was in, and certainly the last one where he does the thing. Even now, as I say it, I got goosebumps. Now, only Lionel Messi gives me goosebumps. As a matter of fact, my wife always jokes whenever she hears screaming in the house, she goes, oh, there's someone screaming like a little girl. It must be daddy watching Lionel Messi, because that's what he does. I mean, that to me is like a religious experience when I see this guy moving on a soccer field. It's unbelievable. Well, I love movies, and like anybody else, I love a good scene. I love Sir Anthony, in Silence of the Lambs and so on. But I had never experienced the physiological response of watching this guy, what he was doing. It was really awe-inspiring. Was I feeling the right thing? You're a professional actor. Did you see that and say, oh my God, this is out of this world?
100%. And I think a film that's based around one person and one person's journey, with the content and the massive amount of talent involved in making that film, he is definitely a very method actor. I think that probably helps you. I think you would probably need to apply a method to the weight of that role. But it depends on what you're playing. How seriously you take it depends on, because the characters infect you as well. So the last thing I did, I was playing a guy who was a bit of a fraud. So I had one bit where they were like, you give this huge Tai Chi lesson to someone. So we booked you in to do Tai Chi and you can learn how to do Tai Chi. And I went, no, because I'm a fraud. I'm going to make it all up on the spot. So that I just pretend that I know how to do Tai Chi. So it depends on who you're playing. For him, that performance is stunning. And I think he probably needed to spend 9 months or a year probably getting ready to do it. And then all of the rest of the time doing it. And then the rest of the time just wearing that one black tuxedo.
Yeah. See, for me, what he did there is a true actor in the sense that you could tell that he's doing this because he is a true artist. In other words, the fame and the money and so on, at least I don't know him, so I'm guessing, I'm surmising. You could really tell that this guy is an artist in the old school sort of thespian sense, right? Whereas most actors, I think, become actors because of the downstream effects of I can get a lot of women, I can get a lot of money, I can have a house in Malibu. So it's not so much that acting itself is a craft that interests me, but I'm interested in being treated like a god. And so it's so refreshing to see someone like this guy, who I think is the epitome of a great actor.
It's totally, it's a stunning and wonderful performance. But I also think that within that very magical time frame between action and cut, I think all sorts can put all sorts of magic into that. I've seen people with a million different methods. Some people get very anxious. I've worked with people who throw up before a take.
Just because they're nervous.
Yeah.
You know, you remember earlier we were talking about the great people and heroes that we might have met. Well, my greatest story of that type is, so you're a musician, so I hope you might know who this is. Have you heard of the group called the Stylistics?
No.
The Stylistics. I'll send it.
I've heard of them, but I don't. What, are they? They're not a new band.
No, they're from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, no, I've got a record of theirs. I've not listened to it, but I've got it.
Okay, so the Stylistics were a group that were even really before my time. I was a young kid growing up in Lebanon. It was part of a sound called the Philly sound, the Philly soul, where groups like the Stylistics and the Delphonics and the Ebonies, it's a genre of soul music, very melodic, very haunting. And I grew up with this guy singing in my ear for, he's about 20 years older than me, 25 years older than me. Well, through the magic of, social media, I connected with him. This is the lead singer of the Stylistics. So my absolute musical hero. I mean, a guy who's been in my brain since I was 5 years old, growing up in Lebanon with long hair. And we became friends and we got to know each other and so on. And it's simply such a magical experience. But so I wanted to link it back to what we're talking about here. You're both an actor and a musician. We often hear that actors want to be rock stars or rock stars want to act. If I don't mean to pit the two against one another, but which of the two do you see yourself as being more a natural instantiation of? Are you an actor, then a musician, or vice versa?
I'm much better at acting than I am at being a musician. So therefore, I try much harder at music. Do you know what I mean? So I'm much more obsessed with music because it doesn't come naturally to me, but I have to do it. It's like I cannot not do it. I'm sat in my room where I do it, and I've constantly done it. But I find it very difficult. I find performing difficult. I don't find writing difficult. I find all that easy. But acting, comes very easy to me, and I love doing it. Music, I find actually very torturous.
So but do you get nervous before? You don't get nervous before acting, but you get nervous before music performance.
Yeah, no, you can stick me on a stage in front of 1,000 people and I'm fine as an actor. But if you stick me on a stage in front of 100 people as a singer, I need new underwear.
Now, is that because you are less confident in your ability in one more than the other, or is that the main reason why there's a difference?
Because I think my music is very personal stuff, so I have nowhere to hide. Like as an actor, you can go, it's my character, whereas music, it's like, this is what I think.
Well, it's funny because I think I remember now why I mentioned the story of Stylistics. So you were talking about being nervous and so on. I asked, his name is Russell Tompkins Jr., the lead singer of the Stylistics. So I asked him during our chat, which I hope you'll take the time at some point and go listen to it because it's truly so personal. It's so amazing. Yeah. I'm speaking there with my musical hero. It's unbelievable. I still can't believe that I can just call him. It's unreal. Anyways, I asked him, there's someone like you, a world famous singer with a million hits and so on. Do you get nervous before you go on stage? And actually, I was hoping that he would answer exactly what he answered, because then I would use that to motivate my students when they get up to present their work in front of the class. And he goes, oh my God, I can't, my legs are going to buckle. I'm so nervous. And so that to me was very empowering, because it shows that if someone of the reputation and fame and accomplishments of this great singer can still not protect him from being nervous and getting the butterflies, then it's normal for all of us to get the butterflies. I tell my students, listen, I've lectured 1,000,000 times, but the first time I come into class when I haven't met you yet, I'm all nervous. I have butterflies in and that kind of humanizes the process. It makes them think, hey, it's normal to be nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. It is normal to be nervous. I will, if I'm same as you, if I'm doing the first night of a play or something, I can't eat. I'm like that. But the minute it starts, I kind of ease into it. But it also depends on the quality of the job. Sometimes you do a job where a scene doesn't work and everyone suddenly becomes nervous. So, it's different. But yeah, I think it's not easy. It's not, I just don't find it too difficult because I think it's fun.
So if you were doing a play, and actually I was going to ask you, you do both films, television and plays, correct?
Yeah, I'll do it all, yeah.
Do you have a preference from all these different modalities?
I think you need to do, I really enjoy theatre. You can't do theatre all the time because it's not well paid enough. But it is that when we were talking earlier about what you learn training wise, you need to do theatre because you have to understand your internal pace. You know, you have to understand how to hold an audience. You have to be in charge of your own pace. And when you're on stage for 2 hours, you're dominating the pace, you're feeling your audience. And that is a skill which is an experiential skill, and you have to do theatre in order to gain that. Otherwise, the editors do it for you in film acting, and you work often with young actors who haven't worked on film or in theatre, and they will pause all the time. They will, they'll say a word and then they'll pause, and you're like, why? We don't do this in life. That's and sometimes I say to people, can I swear on your podcast?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when I was a young actor in my first job, I was really tormented. It was directed by Peter Hall. So Peter Hall, who was the huge famous theatre director in the UK and worldwide, and he was directing the first job. He was quite an impressive man. I was like terrified, and I said to the older actor in the show called Richard Johnson, I was like, what do I do? He's dead now, but he became a great friend. I said, what do I do? I'm getting it all wrong. And he said, here's the tip to being a good actor. He says, say your lines and fuck off. And then I said, but what about? And he said, that doesn't work. Get the fuck on with it.
Wow, beautiful.
That's advice. And this is a man who worked for years and years and years and years and years and was brilliant. I think that's how it is. But going back to that, yes, you need to work in theatre because you need to understand the internal pace. You need to understand how to hold an audience.
Now, given that in a play, in a movie, I mean, yes, you might have many takes, but ultimately it's a one event. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's one movie. But a play, you play the same thing for whatever, 6 months, whatever it is. Now, today you get on, it's the exact same lines, but for whatever reason, you didn't have a fight with your wife, you ate well, you slept well, whatever. Everything seems to be working. But the next day, for whatever reason, the combination of reasons, maybe the other actors are not living up to your standards, it doesn't work. Well, first of all, is that true? Is it true that the same play doesn't resonate as well across 2 time periods? And if so, why?
Absolutely, that's true. There's a couple of aspects to it. One aspect is that you do, the reason why plays, I think, have a 3 month usually running time with the same cast is because it takes an actor 3 months to get the best performance. Maybe no, actually it's probably 6 weeks to 8 weeks to get right onto where the performance needs to be. And then you do start to get a little bit bored sometimes of it. And then the advice they'll often give you, the 2 bits of advice you get in English theatre is, leave your troubles at the stage door, darling.
But is that possible? What happened? You just had a huge fight with your wife, and
the character's a bit more aggressive that night.
Okay, you play him with a lot more gusto. I got it.
And also, I'm kind of free. I'm kind of free in theatre. So they give you your blocking, and I'm kind of like, well, if I want to go and grab hold of something, I'll go and grab hold of something. And people are like, whoa, what are you doing? So I think it should be fresh. And people are paying for live, a lot of money now for live theatre tickets, and unconscionable amounts soon. Now that the COVID has happened.
Are you like, what's the schedule in terms of? I guess your industry is no different than just a general thing. You everything is shut down everywhere, right?
Totally shut down, and I mean, no one knows what's going to happen. So it's.
Do you think there'll be long-term consequences to, movie production and so on, or it's a bleep and eventually everything will fall back to normal?
I don't know. I really don't know, but I think what might happen is that it's going to cost a lot more money, because I think that they're going to have little units of people. So you'll have your own hair person, your own makeup person. There'll be little units. I don't know. It depends on testing and it depends on vaccines. But at the moment, no one knows.
Gotcha.
And they keep saying, yeah, we're going to start next week. And no, we're not starting next week, So I'm fortunate. Well, I'm not fortunate. I was going to buy a house. I now can't buy a house. So I'm just watching my money go. Oh.
Right. That's one of the things that is wonderful, if I can say, about being a professor, and that is that I, have a guaranteed income no matter what. And that's one of the things actually that really upsets me when people were pontificating, looking down on, all those folks who wanted to get back to their businesses. I said, well, yeah, it's easy for you to be moralizing to people from the safety of your guaranteed income. I mean, have a bit of empathy for people who don't know if they can feed their children. No, they're science deniers because they want to break the lockdown. I mean, that's the kind of, to go back to our original point, that's the kind of black or white thinking that is so infuriating.
Also I would be really interested to see a survey of how many people wanted to keep the lockdown and whether those people also voted Remain in Europe. Whether we are that divided as a society that, certain people have certain views about certain things, Brexit, Europe, all of these things seem to be down the party lines. I had my best friend in the world, and, he's self-employed. And he's a renter as well. So in England, you can get mortgage holidays for your houses if you're a landlord, but the renters don't get anything. So, it's really hitting the working classes. And also, I don't know. I'm very like, let's all get the virus and get on with it as a person. But that's why I'm not in charge of the government.
Of course, I could keep you here for another 5 hours, but I want to be mindful of your time. The last thing that I ask people is, are there any projects that you are working on that you feel comfortable talking about that you'd like to use this platform to promote? Take it away, Laurence.
I'm not actually. I'm writing something at the moment because I want to come out of this period of not work with this idea that I've had in my head for a long time. So I'm writing. I'm trying to write an hour a day. But also, the lockdowns had some very interesting effects on creativity because you don't feel creative. So everything is a bit of like.
Is this a book you're writing? A screen?
I'm writing. Currently, it's freeform, but I think I would like to make it into a film one day. Well, because let's face it, after all the people I've upset in show business, the only work I'm going to get is my own.
And I'm assuming if you need a exceptionally good-looking, dashing person to play a professor, you probably already have someone in mind for that role.
I don't think I need to look far, do I?
Hey, Laurence, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I knew you'd be a charming guy, but you've exceeded already any expectations I had coming into the conversation. Thank you so much.
Real pleasure meeting you.
Okay, well, stay on the line. I'm just going to turn off. Thanks, guys. And if you enjoyed this chat, everybody, please subscribe to the show and make sure to share it with everybody. Cheers.